All right, good afternoon. I hope this music is not loud enough to be blatantly heard on this video. It's hard, man. It's hard for me. I'm going to tell you right now. It's hard for me to sit down and make a video now and not have some music on or something. And you know what I mean? My life doesn't orient around YouTube videos. The YouTube videos fit within the orientation of my life. That doesn't even make sense, does it? Anyway, you know what I mean, right? I don't put that much, you already know, I'm not even going to get into it. Anyway, I had a brother ask me about, in the comments section, intermittent fasting. I don't think I've really spoken on this before, which is, if I haven't, that's really amazing. Kind of remarkable. Found something I haven't talked about. Intermittent fasting, no. Don't do it. Look, if it's something you do and you've benefited from it, I can't see where it holds any benefit potential whatsoever if you're trying to gain muscle. I think that it might be useful if you were trying to drop body weight, if you were trying to get lean. But I kind of categorize things. I slice and dice things up into smaller pieces than a lot of people tend to. I think, in many ways, I consider conditioning a separate, achievable element, independent of being exceptionally lean or cut. To a degree, absolutely possible, yes. And I think that getting lean is a different target than dropping weight. That makes sense, right? But people confuse those things and don't even necessarily realize they're confusing them. A lot of people, they're trying to get lean or get cut. And if you look at what they're doing, it's absolutely not optimal. They are really just kind of rolling the dice and dropping body weight. And even if you don't know what you're doing, if you have muscle, if you have developed some muscle, we all have muscle. If you have developed, a decent amount of muscle, you will always lose body fat at a faster rate than you lose muscle tissue. You always will. Listen, you can look at something like the starvation diets or castaway dieting, I call it. If you watch the Tom Cruise movie Castaway, or you watch any of these reality shows like Naked and Afraid or Alone or any of this, how people lose all the weight they lose, some of these people actually look a lot better because they don't look like a skeleton. So muscle, you won't lose muscle. It's not natural to lose muscle at the same rate that you lose body fat. You will consume body fat. Most people, I'm sure there are exceptions to everything, most people are going to consume body fat at a greater rate than they consume muscle tissue. But a lot of the people that I see put diets together with the target being to get lean or to get cut, they're not very efficient. They're effective because, hell, you can starve yourself and you're gonna look more muscular, you're gonna definitely be more cut, and you're gonna definitely lose body fat. But you're gonna lose muscle. And a lot of times people, they don't even realize how much muscle they've sacrificed. A lot of people don't. Initially, before I really grasped the concept, or was actually introduced to the consideration of thermogenic dieting, or how thermogenics play a role in almost everything when you're talking about gaining muscle, losing body fat, whether you're bulking up, whether you're trying to get cut, all this other stuff. Before I was introduced to that, when I would diet down, I would successfully get nice and lean and look good and very muscular. But the first time that I actually employed a genuine thermogenic approach to dieting, I retained, I ended up being like literally like 15 pounds bigger end result, you know. So I mean, in that case, yeah, I'm 100% convinced that that's how much muscle it spared. That's a lot of muscle, but at the time I was really big. So anyway, so I'm not down with intermittent fasting because I think we already naturally do that anyway. Don't we naturally intermittently fast? Isn't that like built into our evolution as an organism? You know, we were hunter-gatherer types, and there were periods where you don't always get food. You don't get large feedings always. That's a luck thing, right? So I'm sure there were many periods where you didn't have like scheduled meals where you actually went longer periods of time between feedings. So I think we're kind of built that way. But there's nothing about setting the goal to actually become much more muscular and then relatively lean. None of that is a natural idea. I mean, that's not even, whether you're enhanced or not enhanced, either way, that is not a goal that is designed into us as a creature. To hold a great deal of muscle and to be leaner than a certain, to be lean beyond a point. In other words, if you're going to hold that much muscle, it's natural to hold so much fat. And there's a tipping point there, and you can realize that yourself, even as a natural, because as you gain muscle, you're going to find the limiting factor is how much body fat you're willing to accept. And as your body fat bumps up a little bit, you realize a really good return in muscular gain from that, I believe. And then you have a tipping point where, if you want more, body fat's going to have to increase again. So anytime we set a goal to be as muscular as possible and to directly put in place mechanisms or strategies to be as lean as possible at the same time, that's completely, it's an unnatural situation for a human being. We're not built for that, So the intermittent fasting thing, I also think, we do that when we sleep. Yeah, I know, people will scoff and say, well, that doesn't count. Well, why doesn't it count? Why doesn't it count? There are some people that are really underweight, and they're so gung-ho about putting on size that they'll keep a jug of milk next to the bed. They'll keep a protein drink next to the bed. And they wake up in the middle of the night or whatever, they'll, take a piss or what have you, they'll have a couple slugs off of that milk, or they'll drink that protein drink, or at least half of it, or whatever. Which probably generates the need to get up again and take another piss. I don't know. But what I would recommend above and beyond intermittent fasting, and again, if whatever your goals are, if you have found intermittent fasting works great for you, then that's what you should do. And you already know this, you don't need my approval or anybody else's approval or agreement. And everything that I do isn't for everybody, and everything ain't for everybody. It's simple as that, across the board. Different strokes for different folks. All right, people, it's like that in every aspect of human endeavor. We can have the same goals, and we can lean toward completely different strategies and use different techniques and mindsets to achieve a very similar goal. So if something works for you, that's proof enough, that's what you should do until, hopefully, with an open mind, you maybe find something that works better. And again, I'm a big advocate of not breaking it if it isn't broken. Don't fix what's not broken. So if it already works for you, you're already satisfied, man, you're happy with where you are, can't ask for more than that. Congratulations. Then no need for you to think outside of that box, because that box suits you very well. Simple. So having said all that, What I would advocate or recommend, or maybe just throw out there for you to consider, is rather than intermittent fasting, and this is if you're trying to put size on, I would consider a tactic where you intermittently consume liquid nutrition as opposed to solid food nutrition. I would incorporate that maybe the way that some people incorporate intermittent fasting. Anytime I do anything, and that's kind of like my form of intermittent fasting, which it really isn't fasting at all, but I do it because I feel it gives my digestive system a break. I feel it gives my digestive system a break. You know, because what you really have to think about is how much eating it actually requires. And if you're really trying to put on size, you're really trying to speak to your body and say, hey, I want you to do this, and you're going to do it, then you're really going to have to push the boundaries of what you're used to if you're nowhere near where you're trying to go. And if you get to the point where you're saying to yourself, how many hours am I awake in the day that I'm not sleeping? Of those hours, how many of those hours does eating take place? Within how many of those hours does eating take place? And if you expand that so that you are eating more frequently and you're looking at it in that regard, you know, how many hours between meals? What if I eat something every hour, if I can? What if I consume some amount of nutrition every hour or every other hour, right? Some folks it's every 3 hours, every 2 or 3 hours, which is more than sufficient, but in some cases, maybe it isn't. It all depends on where you're at. You know, it's a gradual learning thing. A lot of people that tell me I eat a lot and can't gain size, when I look at what they're really eating and break it down, they're not eating a lot, but to them it's a lot. You know what I mean? So if you're stuck in that kind of situation, or maybe you're not really eating a lot, but you don't realize it, to you it's a lot, then maybe you can expand on how many hours throughout the day there is in which you're consuming food or nutrition. So that's another positive aspect to intermittent liquid feeding. Liquids are always going to be more readily absorbed and assimilated by the body, requiring less work. Work equals calories. Calories equal work. They're synonymous in this game. Calories are the coin of the realm. So if liquid nutrition requires fewer calories to be absorbed and assimilated, digested, absorbed, assimilated, then that's a no-brainer. If you're trying to save and spare every calorie, it's small steps to the moon. I've had people say sometimes, well, regardless of whatever topic I'm speaking on, that's such a little bit. How much can that have an influence? It can have a huge influence over time. A huge influence over time. To the degree that I would say this. We know that you can gain weight, you can gain mass, you can gain muscle in a deficit. You can lose body fat in a surplus, right? Or so this is what's out there. But the reality is, in my opinion, that when you break it down to its smallest minute particle and you examine it, you literally are always creating a deficit when you're losing. You are always enjoying a surplus when you're gaining. And that, we can go way down the rabbit's hole with that. That is more expansive than you might at first acknowledge. And there's no point in us getting into all that, because that's really a lot, and it's not always necessary. What are you going to do with that information? You know what I mean? Information is only as valuable as what you can do with it, how you can employ it, how you can exploit it to serve your purposes and help you reach your goals, or to increase or potentialize, improve your position. So, I'm not a intermittent fasting guy, but I am an intermittent liquid nutrition guy. I'm an intermittent liquid nutrition guy. Now, the reason that this primarily would be considered within a plan that sees you trying to gain size, muscle, is because that liquid nutrition, you're going to have a hard time finding very much fiber in liquid nutrition. It can be found, but it's not easy. And not as easy as it is done with food. So when you take away fiber, and when you make things, and in fact, if you're trying to put on size, if you really want to put on the size and it's difficult for you, then you have to get down to these minute details. You kind of have to watch your fibrous food intake, because that's all about thermogenics. The cost of that food to be digested, processed, absorbed, assimilated, that nutrition, the cost, how expensive is it? And the more complex or complicated that food is, the more fiber in that food, the more costly it is, the more calories are consumed that the food's bringing, less of that remains after the process, the digesting, the absorption. It's more costly. So, easier calories that you can get, better for getting big. The more difficult the food is to process, the nutrition is to process and absorb, you're creating that deficit on the back end. You know what I mean? I don't create the deficit at the beginning. You won't see the deficit. If you look at the diet, you won't see a deficit. If you look at how you've been eating and then you look at the diet you're about to undertake, if it's a diet that I'm helping you with or that I've put together, or if it's my diet in my case, and you look at it and you had knowledge of how I had been eating, etc., prior or up to, you would look at that and not find a deficit in it at all. But yet there is a deficit created. The diet's designed to create that deficit by exploiting the thermogenic effect of the food. It's really a no-brainer. It's not really cutting-edge stuff. It's been there forever. What else did I want to touch on about this? I'm sure there's something that I'm missing. That's basically what it all boils down to. And that's why you may want to even augment or supplement with a fiber supplement if you really took things to an extreme and were incorporating a large majority of low to no fiber nutrition in your diet to kind of reverse thermogenic diet. You're still using thermogenics, but you're not using it to turn up the heat. But you're still going to need that fiber. So, the fiber supplement standalone thing, because that way you're not sacrificing nutrition calories from your foodstuffs. The standalone addition to the diet would be your fiber then. And that's all you're expecting out of that. I had right on the tip of my tongue something else that I needed to talk about in this regard. And now it eludes me. Let me think about it a second here. So if you were going to manipulate thermogenic effects food have, like I've said, endless amounts of times, and going in great depth. There are videos I have that are in great depth that explain this detail to detail. They reference the studies, they reference the research, all of that. I have done that. I'm not going to do that every single time when I've spoken of this. God knows how many times. You're going to be using the same thought process as far as the thermogenic effect of food to get big. You're just flipping it over. Now, like I was saying, instead of thinking you're going to create the deficit, in other words, you could eat same amount of food, same number of calories, And what the order of what the foods are that make up that diet could differentiate whether you were going to be creating a deficit or whether you were going to be exploiting a surplus. Same exact number of calories. Same exact number of calories. You know, it's one way if you're trying to exploit a surplus. You want foods very inexpensively absorbed, processed, digested, etc. And the opposite is true if you're trying to create a deficit. And ideally, whatever you would be eating calorie-wise, total calories in the day, if you have an accurate accounting, you would pretty much begin your diet at that point. You would want to maintain those calories. The more closer you replicate that, the better, but not in every case. There are cases, and I have a guy now, I have a brother now, that if you've let yourself really get up there and you're really crushing the scale, way up there, and you want to get it off, many times, I can increase the amount of food you eat drastically and the number of calories and get your metabolism moving and you start to lose weight. Yeah. And then if you want to keep the weight coming off, then we begin to modify as we go and change foods out, pull out less complicated foods and plug in more fibrous foods. That's how you do it. And then, of course, you're going to move on to exercise-induced thermogenesis with your cardio and blah, 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 blah. But yeah, there are times where, there are many times, most people, I will turn the calories up and they lose body fat. I will turn it up and lose body fat because if you can get it together with the thermogenics idea, you can actually feed the musculature and you can actually enjoy a surplus and a deficit. Now I know people are going to be like, what? That's completely ridiculous. That makes no sense. So one day you'll think that it makes plenty of sense and everybody already knew it. Because that's how, how the body is. It's kind of like an O2 sensor, how it's designed in modern day automobiles. If you look at it, that we're always switching cross counts. We're always going from rich to lean, rich to lean, rich to lean. Right? There's a reason they do that. We don't need to get into all that, but that's how it works. It's the same way with your metabolism. It's the same way hormonally in your body. You don't stay in a positive balance, positive nitrogen balance. You don't stay in a negative nitrogen balance. You don't stay anabolic or catabolic. You're like this throughout the day. Workout, catabolic. After the workout, anabolic. You're feeding the body, right? So most of the day you're like the same way anyway. So our concept of time, we consider the day 24 hours. We consider 7 days to be a week. We consider 365 days to be a year. That's how we count time, mark time. But our body in its physiology, in an evolutionary sense, doesn't know time. I mean, it has a rhythm, right? Certainly it aligns with the rhythm ideally, but you can throw a wrench in there and disturb that, or a portion of that. And that's what you do when you shake things up to get the body to start to do something drastically different. And that could be, if you're really an obese person, that could be actually eating more calories. I'm not saying, look, if you already eat, like if you've got the feed bag strapped on all day long, that's a different story, far cry from most cases where a lot of people that are overweight, they've already kind of gotten bummed out. They've slowed down. They really aren't eating that much now. They really aren't. But their body, their metabolism, the human body being so advanced, so refined from an evolutionary point, it can slow itself down and make do with what it has. And we could get into that ad nauseum, but that's all off the beaten path of this, what the scope of this video is supposed to be about. This video is simply about intermittent fasting. I don't do it other than when I go to bed at night. But if you're trying to put on muscle, retain as much muscle as possible, et cetera, maybe you might want to give it a try, intermittent liquid nutrition. And if intermittent fasting makes you feel good and better, and it helps you or serves you, and you already know that. You know, you don't need me to co-sign that and say, yeah, I do it and it's great. You know what I mean? I don't do it. It doesn't seem to fit anywhere within any of my goals. So that's it. This is getting too long. Let me get this up, because I'm drinking my pre-workout so I can do my bicep video out here today. See you guys soon.